It's been an intense month in Washington. I don't know about you, but the pace has been so furious, I've sometimes felt a little helpless to have much of a voice. And yet, Common Sense American has also had some of its most important developments over the last month, developments that have moved us squarely into the center of what's happening more than ever. It's becoming increasingly clear that as a Common Sense Americans, we can make an outsized difference even with all that's happening. So I want to start by giving you a heads up that in the next several weeks, you'll have two of the most consequential opportunities to weigh in Common Sense Americans have ever had. First, on March 13th, we'll have a national members meeting where we'll share the latest and get your guidance for what's ahead. Second, soon after that, you'll have a chance to formally weigh in on what issues we should work on in 2025. So now let me share the inside perspective we have on what's happening in Washington and why it'll be so important for you to weigh in and weigh in quickly. Over the last month, it seems like bipartisan cooperation has become kind of a quaint pipe dream, right? I mean, just, like what chance is there in these circumstances? Still, in just the last week, we've met with a dozen congressional offices. These meetings have been a huge step forward in the project we've been telling you about, the project of working with a bipartisan group in the Senate and one in the House. So I want to remind you a little bit of the groundwork we did for this effort last year. Then I'll share the exciting developments this year that are making our work more urgent and more consequential than ever. So last summer, we proposed that a Senate and a House group of the most most bipartisan oriented members of Congress work with us to identify the same issue to work on in 2025. Gratefully, Lisa Murkowski, Republican from Alaska, and Michael Bennet, Democrat from Colorado, enthusiastically agreed to co-chair the Senate effort. On December 5th, they convened a meeting with 10 additional Senate offices and asked me to lead the discussion of Common Sense American's proposal. That was just a month after an intensely partisan election, but you could feel the energy in the room for what we proposed. Our initial discussions in the House last year suggested similar enthusiasm. The idea has gained even more traction this year. We've been meeting one-on-one with Senate offices, the Senate offices who came to the December 5th meeting, to discuss the process and get their suggestions for promising issues to work on. We've also met one-on-one with more than a dozen offices of House members known for working across the aisle, and have heard the same enthusiasm. In fact, every single House office we've talked with so far has said they're interested in participating. How can these senators and representatives, both Republicans and Democrats, be so confident about the effectiveness of working with each other and with us, given everything we see in the news every day? There are three reasons. First, they recognize the fundamental reality that razor-thin Republican majorities mean that most important measures will require at least some Democratic support to pass. Over the last month, much of the news has been about the Trump administration's executive orders. But in a system of highly separated powers, the Constitution invests many of the federal government's most important powers in Congress. For example, the measure that Congress has passed to fund the federal government expires on March 14th. Currently, House Republicans can only lose one or two votes from their conference without needing Democrats to pass any measure, including extending the government's funding. Because significant differences remain among House Republicans, most believe that some Democratic cooperation will be needed to avoid a government shutdown, not to mention to pass the budget resolutions they're working on or any of another host of policy measures. And this has been the pattern throughout American history, especially over the last 8 to 10 years. Of the 8 major bills Congress has passed in that time, only 2 have been essentially partisan. The tax cut legislation Republicans passed in the first Trump administration is the first of those, and the second partisan major piece of legislation is the Inflation Reduction Act that Democrats passed in the Biden administration. All 6 of the other bills, significant bills that have passed in the last 8 to 10 years, have been driven by the bipartisan Senate group that we're working with. So here's the fundamental insight that almost everyone misses about the last 8 years. With very narrow majorities as the norm, The center of American policymaking has not been the White House, the Speaker's office, or the Senate Majority Leader's office, regardless of which party controlled them. The center of American policymaking has been the bipartisan Senate group we're working with. The more than 24 bipartisan-oriented members of Congress who are excited to work with each other and us recognize that with the slimmest majority yet in the House, this is as true as ever going forward. The second reason that these bipartisan-oriented members of Congress are so confident about working with each other and us is that they recognize the power of our idea that both a Senate and a House group participate. As bitter as the partisan divide is, the tensions between the House and the Senate are often just as great. They recognize that with a Senate and a House group working with each other from the get-go, the chances of getting something meaningful done go way up. Third, these members of Congress recognize how powerful your voices are in the legislative process. Of the 6 major bills over the last 8 years that the Senate bipartisan group has passed, we've played a substantial role with half of them. Our 3-for-3 track record has built real trust that we're a representative voice of what everyday Americans think, a calm, steady, substantive voice that can make a real difference in Congress. It's fascinating to me how much they enjoy meeting with us. They're exhausted by the extremes who talk louder and longer than the rest of us. They know that most Americans aren't as divided as the ones they're hearing from. They're deeply grateful that 85,000 Americans from across the country and political spectrum have come together in a way that powerfully engages Congress. They're genuinely looking forward to hearing what issues you think we should work on together. I share the confidence that these members of Congress have that together we can help practical bipartisan wisdom prevail in these noisy partisan times. There will be much that still happens in the coming months and years that one part of our members or another will find truly upsetting. But as common sense Americans, we're not limited to cursing the darkness. We've lit one of the brightest candles burning in these dark partisan times. With your help in the coming weeks, that candle is about to grow much brighter. I hope you'll join us for our national member meeting. And no matter what, please weigh in as soon as we send you the survey on what issue we should work on this year. The members of Congress at the center of American policymaking are literally waiting to hear from you. It's such a privilege to be shoulder to shoulder with you in this important work. Thank you.